All right, should we get started?
Take it away, Gabriel.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. Good evening. Hopefully you were able to either make it to our initial stakeholder meeting or one of the focus groups, but for anyone who was not, we will provide a little bit of a background on the Sandy Creek's 9-element watershed plan. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to, again, provide a little bit of an overview for those of you who aren't already present, and also to give a summary of our stakeholder outreach thus far in the process. And also we'll give a project outline and some tools for you to stay involved and up to date as the project moves forward. So my name is Gabriel Yurden, and I'm with Tug Hill Commission, and our role has been to provide stakeholder outreach support to the other groups making this 9-element plan happen. And those groups would be the soil and water conservation districts from Jefferson, Oswego, and Lewis counties, technical support from DEC, Upstate Freshwater Institute, and FLOPA. And with that, I will hand it over to Emily to talk more about the plan.
Thank you, Gabriel. I hope many of you already know me. I'm Emily Fell, and I am the Eastern Great Lakes Watershed Coordinator for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Great Lakes Program in partnership with the Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. And my role is providing technical assistance and coordinating with others within DEC, including Division of Water, as this process moves forward. And I'm going to get started by talking a little bit more about the clean water planning and 9-element in particular planning process. And a 9-element plan is an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and DEC plan for clean water that is developed at the watershed scale. A watershed being an area of land that drains to a specific water body, such as a creek, river, or lake. A tributary that drains to Sandy Creeks, all of the tributaries draining to Sandy Creeks, and Lake Ontario would all be examples of a watershed at different scales. And these scales are referred to as hydraulic unit codes, with smaller codes being for larger watersheds. Watershed plans are typically developed for inland lakes and rivers in New York, typically at the Huck 8 scale, to identify and address non-point source water quality concerns through a science-informed approach. Local interest and support is needed to champion the planning and implementation of best management practices, or BMPs, identified in the plan. A 9-element plan can help projects in the watershed be more competitive for grants, including EPA, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and DEC Water Quality Improvement Project grants. They can also help to avoid a regulatory clean water plan known as a total maximum daily load. There are 9 key elements or required considerations within a 9E plan that I will go over on the next slide. The 9 key elements of a watershed management plan, as identified by US EPA, identify pollutant sources to be addressed, sub-watersheds or areas within the watershed to be targeted based on their nutrient or pollutant loading, as determined by watershed modeling and monitoring. And it works with stakeholders to identify best management practices like cover crops, vegetated buffer strips, comprehensive nutrient management planning, manure storage, green infrastructure that uses vegetation and engineering to improve stormwater management, rain gardens, tree planting, and other practices that are likely to be implemented locally, and stakeholders help to identify those practices. The plan identifies grant funding for implementation, such as DEC's Water Quality Improvement Project funding, Department of Agriculture and Markets non-point source abatement and control grants, and other state and federal sources. And the plan then aims to build relationships with farmers, landowners, and municipalities who can help implement the plan and benefit from grants and water quality improvements. A schedule is developed, which a realistic schedule could be 10 to 20 years, and that's based on local input. And then the plans identify measures to evaluate implementation over time to determine if we are achieving desired outcomes that were established. The criteria used to evaluate success includes qualitative criteria such as improvements to best uses, which include swimming, fishing, and drinking water, and quantitative criteria such as decreases in nutrients where practices have been implemented. And the monitoring plan is developed in the final element in coordination with experts like experts at DEC and UFI who help ensure the monitoring evaluates desired criteria effectively under a quality assurance project plan. To date, there have been 5 90 plans approved by the New York State DEC, which include the Genesee River, Black River, Suffolk County, Owasco Lake, and Seneca-Cuca Lake. There are also 8 plans currently under development for Wappingers Creek, Owasco Lake, Skaneateles Lake, Oneida Lake, and Seneca-Cuca Lake, Canandaigua Lake, Lake Erie tributaries, and Nassau County. We are planning to develop one for Sandy Creeks. Within the North Country region, the Black River Watershed is a model for success under a 90 plan. We in the Black River Initiative, we've evaluated actions that have occurred in the Black River Watershed since 2010 and since 2016, since the 9-element plan was finalized, and over 72 actions that leveraged over $35 million in funding have been supported, as identified in this map, where the orange are agricultural management practices, the brown are wastewater treatment improvements, the green are green infrastructure and restoration projects, the red are remediation projects, and the black are recreational access projects. Specific projects in the Black River Watershed have included green infrastructure, as you see here in the top corner. This was a project at JCC, which used permeable pavement in the area, the entrance area at Jefferson Community College, and also planted trees and installed rain gardens and improved the drainage to reduce runoff to the Black River. Cover crops have been another example. In Lewis County, we've seen a lot of cover crops implemented. Wastewater treatment improvements, and in the right corner, this is a nice photo of the clean water holding tank at Watertown's wastewater treatment plant, where they've been able to leverage tens of millions of dollars to help support secondary treatment and remove biosolids and support anaerobic digestion. And then manure storage, as you see on the bottom. This is a nice photo of a Lewis County soil and water manure storage that was implemented, which also supports comprehensive nutrient management on farms. And these have been awarded by various state and federal grants, including DEC's water quality improvement projects, the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation, that was $800,000 that was awarded to Jefferson Community College for their green infrastructure projects. The New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets have awarded millions to farmers in the Black River Watershed to support things like cover crops and manure storage and comprehensive nutrient management. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has awarded funding as well for conservation practices like riparian buffers. Federal Emergency Management Agency has helped support some flood mitigation activities. Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, a U.S. Forest Service grant, was awarded to support green infrastructure and tree planting projects. And other grants are available through the New York State Consolidated Funding Application, New York State Grant, Great Lakes Small Grants, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and many more. And if you are interested in learning more about grant funding, feel free to reach out to greatlakes@dec.ny.gov, and I'm happy to share more information or learn about your project ideas. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah Trick with Jefferson County Soil and Water to talk more about the Sandy Creek's watershed and 90 planning process in this region.
So I just have a couple slides right here. This slide's for anyone who hasn't been able to make it to our other meetings. That big orange stripe in the middle is 81, just so you have a reference of the extent of this watershed. Next slide, Jen. And then this slide just shows how old the publicly available data is. So a lot of the data for this watershed is like around 10 years old. And with the land use changes in the watershed, that makes things dicey on the already existing data side. Next. And then for the 9E plan, we're going to do the water quality testing to update that data, as well as some culvert assessments. And culvert assessments give us a eyes on the ground view of things. You can see a lot of different problems. I took all these this summer in the Sandy Creeks watershed. So you can see erosion, failing infrastructure, bank support, and any clogs there are inlets, which could lead to flooding. And then we'll hand it over to UFI for this part.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So I just have a few slides really just to recap. If you were at the first meeting, this will be a recap. If you're new, this is just an overview of what we're up to in terms of collecting data to support the 9EP for the Sandy Creeks watershed. So when we talk about water quality in particular, really what we're talking about from a watershed planning perspective is really nutrients and bacteria. So we're looking for areas that are based on those sources of data impaired or of less quality, and where we could potentially implement some steps, BMPs, that would improve those conditions. So from the nutrient side, what we're really focused on is phosphorus and nitrogen. And again, the reason there being that they're the primary nutrients for ecosystem productivity, causing algae to grow, causing the harmful algal blooms that have been experienced in Sandy Pond. There's an example here on this photo to the right on the slide from North Sandy Pond last September, as well as another interesting aspect in the Great Lakes being benthic cladophora, that benthic algae that grows near shore and can wash up and be really smelly when it starts to decay. In terms of what we're measuring in this particular 9EP effort, it's the streams, so the tributaries, as Shara just showed on the watershed map, as well as considering the receiving water bodies where those streams come to, whether it be Sandy Pond or Lake Ontario directly, some of the other nearshore embayments. Then a big part of the 9EP assessment is a modeling phase, which I'm not going to cover a ton of modeling today. I think that may be part of the further outreach when we get to that step, but there'll be a model associated with all the data we're collecting that will inform those future steps and recommendations down the line. All right, so as Sarah mentioned, there is some existing tributary data. Here's a sort of the lay of the land on the map of DEC data from 2012 to 2020. You'll notice there that the yellow circles are where we do have nutrient information. The black circles are locations where nutrients were not measured. So those are basically physical measurements or macroinvertebrate measurements. So from a 9E standpoint, we really do need to make an effort, and we are, to update a lot of the information in terms of the water quality in these tributaries. And I think in the next slide we'll show you what we're planning to do. Actually, sorry, can you slide back just one? I jumped ahead of myself. So again, just a little caveat on the existing data. Oftentimes when it was measured on one day in a given year. So that tells us something for sure, but it doesn't tell us a seasonal pattern in water quality over the course of different seasons, what's going on in the spring versus what is happening in the late fall, for example. So again, from a 9E standpoint, the existing data is good. It's helpful to inform our understanding of what's going on, sort of as a baseline or an initial baseline, but it's really not geographically representative, and certainly not doesn't cover high flow events, low flow, those seasonal patterns. Okay. All right, next one. So what we're planning to do, and we actually got a jump start on collecting this data yesterday. So we're on the board, if you will, in terms of getting data collected. There's 13 sub watersheds associated with the Sandy Creeks project area, as we're calling it. And we'll be collecting samples 2 times a month over the course of a 12-month period. And I say that's our plan, right? But we set this up to be adaptive. So as we go through it and we start to see some patterns in the data we're collecting, we're giving ourselves a bit of grace to be adaptive in terms of changing sites, changing frequencies, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just a little bit of a laundry list on what we're going to be collecting. So nutrients is the total phosphorus, dissolved and soluble reactive phosphorus. We'll measure nitrogen, nitrate, nitrite, and then total ammonia. And again, the idea there being to just get a sense of what the water quality is with those six parameters. We'll also measure suspended solids. So essentially get a handle on sediment loads coming down through these tributaries. We'll measure bacteria, and then some of the physical measurements being water flow, temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen. And important to mention that this isn't being done in a vacuum. We have developed and have an approved quality assurance project plan approved by DEC. That's one of the requirements ultimately for use of data in terms of a regulatory aspect. Again, this isn't a regulatory plan, but just mentioning that it's all documented in a QAP and approved by the state. I think that's all I had. Oh, I've touched upon modeling here quickly. Again, I don't want to focus too much time because we're not quite at this phase yet. But there will be a watershed model in some shape or form. That model will incorporate land cover within these sub watersheds. It will do a hindcast on weather, so incorporating historical weather patterns for precipitation and temperature, and then use that data that we're going to collect on the nutrient loads, the nutrient concentrations and developed loads. So each one of these sub watersheds in the map will have its own sort of sub watershed model, which will be useful that we can compare relatively the contributions of the different impairments that we're measuring here to understand, where within this project area where we can potentially focus some efforts for improvement.
Back to me again. So these next slides summarize the feedback we got from our stakeholder and focus group outreach. This one, we did a mapping exercise at the end of our first stakeholder meeting. So this is the feedback we got. There were folks who were concerned about droughts in the headwaters. Some wells have been going dry. Others were concerned about the large scale farming in the area and how much manure is being spread, if it's being spread at the right times. And then a lot of people around Sandy Pond were worried about if their septics were working, harmful algal blooms, and low water levels. Where is my notes? There we go. So these are our 5 focus groups that we had. We had municipal leaders, agricultural and forestry, shoreline and riparian owners, conservation, and business and recreation. We met with them each for about an hour, and we asked them a series of questions that we summarized in the next slides. This question we asked before we met in our first stakeholder meeting. It kind of gives us a sense of how people were feeling about the watershed before we went into it. Most people chose 5 right in the middle of our scale. We took that to say that they weren't really sure about the watershed, but we have a nice bell curve here where some people think the water has improved a lot and some people think it's deteriorated a lot. We have no idea where they live in the watershed, so that might skew their perspective either way, but we'll find out how the watershed's doing through the testing that we're doing now. We asked the same sort of question in our focus groups, trying to dig deeper into the answers we got. So most of our focus groups mentioned the shift of agriculture in the area from small family farms to larger industrial agriculture. But in that, our agricultural group wanted us to note that as ag has shifted to that more industrial form, regulations have increased. So as their herds get bigger, their farms get bigger, there's more regulations that they have to follow. So they feel that they're actually doing a better job with water quality than when they were smaller farms. Our forestry group noted a shift to solar. So a lot of our forests are being cleared to become solar developments. There's more invasives that was noted by most of our groups. in our municipal group and shoreline groups said that there's been a lot more development and year-round housing along the shorelines. Next slide, Jen. This was from our stakeholder group, our survey. So it just kind of gives you an overview of what people were thinking. We want to note that this isn't comprehensive. Only about half of 1% of the folks who own land in the watershed have participated so far. So everything today for the stakeholder outreach is kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's not what everyone thinks. Next slide. We asked everyone in our focus group what their concerns for the watershed were. A lot of our groups said the fluctuating shorelines worried them. They're not sure how that affects water quality. Flooding can impact their septic systems. Again, everyone was worried about whether the septic systems by the pond are working or not. Agriculture was worried about how the public views them, since they seem to view them so negatively in this watershed. And our foresters were concerned about forest regeneration and if it's occurring healthfully or not in the watershed. And then pie in the sky question, changing it to something a little more positive. We asked each group what best management practices they'd like to see implemented. Most groups said that they'd love to see expanded water and sewage in this watershed. Forestry said that they'd like to keep our forests, and they'd love to see a law passed where solar can't replace forests. So if you were going to do a solar development, make it not be in a forest, because that's actually net negative carbon wise. The forest would take in more carbon than going solar would save. They also wanted to see better BMPs, better regeneration, and hopefully less invasive species. And then our municipal leaders said that they'd love to see an expanded sewer too. And they noted that they'd love to implement BMPs, but it has to be cost effective and benefit more than just one section of the community. And back to Gabe.
So some next steps on how the project watershed plans are a multi-year process, and with our current partnerships and funding, we hope to complete the monitoring, modeling, and writing of the plan by 2025. And next steps for this year, Jefferson, Oswego, and Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation District staff are working with Upstate Freshwater Institute to collect water samples, and that's already beginning, as you heard earlier. Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District will hire interns to conduct culvert assessments over the next 2 field seasons. Also, Jefferson District will host a volunteer water chestnut pull in Mansville in July. The date is still TBD, so stay tuned for that. And that event will act as an informal education event on watersheds, invasive species, and a forum to share updates on water quality testing and how the project is progressing this summer. So stay tuned for more details, and as the testing progresses, there will be public updates. And with that, we would like to open up for questions anyone might have. You can either put a question in the chat or raise your hand, and I think I can unmute you if you raise your hand.
I was wondering, just to get us going, why people tuned in tonight, what interested them about this webinar, and you know, what are they looking forward to within the watershed plan?
back teeth kind of cramped. It looked like I'm stuck in my knees and my head. That was not very long.
Elizabeth put in the chat, preserving recreational opportunities for Sandy Pond area and cleaning up the pond. And that's definitely been a common theme with a lot of our stakeholders. And yeah, definitely will getting some good data on tributaries to Sandy Pond. Emily, did you have any other questions like that, or should we let everyone go early?
Let us know how landowners on the pond. Was there anything about the stakeholder engagement or the focus group, outcomes that surprised anyone or that wasn't included, that they didn't see included?
Got movement across the street.
We got a couple. Do you
want to take a question from Brittany?
Yeah.
Okay, we can let her talk. Brittany, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak to the group.
Hello.
There you go.
I can't see my own camera. I don't know if I'm able to be seen or not, but can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you. Your video's not on, but we can hear you clearly.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out the whole time. No, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Joe Chevroletti had reached out to our office and just to let us know what the study was about. And I was just here to learn tonight, to hear about your research and what a 9E plan was. And it's interesting what's going on and how wide of an area you're talking about. So for tonight, I'm just here to learn. So thanks for the presentation.
Great. We were hoping that some people who weren't able to attend the previous meetings during the day might be able to make it tonight. So glad you're able to make it.
Thank you.
We had a couple more comments. Someone attending to get informed on the progress of the plan. So yes, sampling has begun. Stakeholder meeting results. Most points were included. That's good to hear. We hope it was comprehensive. That's about it. Well, should we wrap up unless any final comments?
Are you able to share the slideshow, or does it have to be within the video?
I think we'll put it on the Tug Hill website after this is done. So in a
Okay.
couple of days, it'll be available.
And we'll send a follow-up email for everyone who registered for this with those details.
Great.
Just put in the chat the link to the Sandy Creek page that we're populating.
Super.
How our community outreach, we tried to target municipal leaders from every town in the watershed and have them disseminate information. Conservation groups, we use GIS tools to target large landowners, and then we also reached out to community groups around Sandy Pond and sportsmen's groups So we tried to cast a wide of a net in the communities in the watershed as possible to reach anyone who would be interested to educate them on that. So
We also posted on our social medias, and I know that the soil and water districts reached out to farmers specifically too.
all right, well, with that, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll keep everyone up to date. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.